This is Hannibal and Piper here, the disappearing Piper, because she's black, from thehannibaltv.com. And this is my weekly review of the points I find interesting in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. There's a lot more in here that I don't talk about because I don't find it interesting, but some of you might. So for more details, get it yourself. But it's a huge update this week, starting with WWE. Their first pay-per-view in Puerto Rico in 18 years saw one of their hottest crowds in history, which I did hear the crowd. I've seen clips of it, and I agree with that. Puerto Rico is always known to have hot crowds. They're at the Jose Miguel Agrelat Coliseum in San Juan, where I once saw WWE in 2006. A house show that was very good, that featured Shawn Michaels doing a crazy blade job, Ric Flair, John Cena, I think, against Umaga. It was a big show. Anyways, Meltzer says it was the loudest crowd since the 97 Canadian Stampede show, and the hottest pops were for Bad Bunny, Carlito, Savio Vega. I also heard Brock Lesnar and Zelina Vega got good reactions. They had Brock Lesnar, of course, do intentional blood. They did not stop the match when blood happened, as they have in recent years, as recently as WrestleMania with Finn Balor getting cut open. And Meltzer brings up that Vince McMahon publicly said AEW was a blood and guts company a few years ago, since they do blood, but McMahon is now back to doing blood himself, which, by the way, they have a revolving no blood policy in WWE. They had one in the late 80s and early 90s, and it disappeared until there was an incident with Bob Orton Jr., who had Hep C at the time, bleeding on The Undertaker in the early 2000s. Then they put it in place again. But they have done intentional blood a bunch of times since then, usually hard way, though, without blading. Apparently, the paid attendance was 15,000 for Backlash. But the actual attendance in the building was 17,966. It's interesting because for SmackDown in San Juan at the same arena the night before, they claimed that 13,800 was a sellout. And I did have a friend who did a little report for me, which I believe was in my Sunday news update, that was at both shows. My friend who's a cop in Puerto Rico, Rolando Martinez, and he said there was a lot of empty seats for the Friday show, and the Friday show was not actually sold out. The pay-per-view buys were the lowest in company history, 6,700. Most people have Peacock now, paying only about $5 a month for the pay-per-views and everything else that comes with Peacock. Batista's Guardian of the Galaxy did $344 million worldwide last weekend. He's doing great. Billy Graham is not doing great. He's in the process of total organ shutdown. And Valerie Coleman, his wife, said the doctors are preparing her for the worst. Of course, Billy Graham does have a GoFundMe up for anyone that wants to help him. There's a lot of interviews with him on this channel. Great guy. 2027 WrestleMania is going to be in Nashville, Tennessee, when they have a new football stadium opening there. Drew McIntyre's contract doesn't expire until the end of the year, and since he's been out due to some injury or health reason lately, Meltzer brings up that WWE could tack on that extra time to the end of his contract. So it could, even if he were to jump to AEW, he likely wouldn't contractually be able to until next year. In ratings news, MLW's Real Show has officially been canceled as of May 2nd. Did not do well in the ratings. Dynamite did a 0.32 rating from Detroit with over 6,000 fans in attendance. AEW All Access did a 0.12 rating. Rampage, which is a show it seems like they've given up on, only did a 0.09 rating. Rampage has turned into what Dark and Dark Elevation used to be. I grab a swig of coffee here, since Piper got me up at 5:30 in the morning. The problem with being in a house, I moved to a house, guys, to digress for a second. And even though I got her one of these grass pea pads for the balcony off my bedroom, she wants to go outside and mark her territory now. So she got me up 3 times over the course of the night last night to go outside. NXT did a 0.17 rating. I just said that. Raw from Jacksonville, AEW Country, did a 0.51 rating with 7,200 paid. Stone Cold Takes on America is not doing well in the ratings, only did a 0.09 rating. This is a show where he does like regular stuff and regular jobs. I don't know. I was an Austin fan, but I have zero interest in watching that. SmackDown did a 0.52 rating from Puerto Rico, and again, it did have more than a 1 million gate, and they are claiming it was a sellout, but they're saying at 13,800 it was a sellout. Yet the following night, Backlash sold out at almost 18,000. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. AEW has over 60,000 tickets sold for their Wembley Stadium event in August. Apparently, it's going to be set up for a capacity of 74,000. Apparently, there's going to be they're expected to officially announce that Collision, their Saturday show, is going to start June 17th in Chicago with CM Punk. It's going to be called the Second Coming of CM Punk. How many second comings is this guy going to have? But this is going to be announced next week. I understand they've been paying him to sit at home, and he's up there with Jericho as one of the biggest names under contract to AEW. So I'll be happy to see him back because he creates news. And was I ever a fan of his? No, but I do admit that he's a star. Apparently, he's probably going to feud with Samoa Joe, my old tag team partner. The undefeated tag team of Hannibal and Samoa Joe, who, by the way, we decimated Jinder Mahal and Gamma Singh Jr. Just decimated them. Jinder Mahal has never beat me. Not that he's relevant anymore. I heard he's making about $900,000 a year, but I haven't seen him doing much since he jobbed to Rick Steiner's kid on NXT a few months ago. Apparently, regarding UK attendance, obviously I just mentioned AEW did over 60,000 tickets sold so far for their August show. The highest WCW show ever was in Manchester in 2000. Booker T against Jeff Jarrett, 16,318. The biggest Impact crowd of all time was in 2009 at Wembley Arena for Jeff Jarrett versus Kurt Angle. They had 8,100. That is the biggest all-time Impact crowd. That includes the crowds they had with Hulk Hogan for Jeff Jarrett wrestling the guy whose wife he stole, Kurt Angle's Karen. She's now Karen Jarrett from Karen Angle. Although, as I said, I have been watching these Steve Austin podcasts on the WWE network. It's pretty much the only thing that interests me on the Canadian WWE network. And he interviewed both Jarrett and Kurt Angle, and he didn't bring up that whole situation, which I think is the most interesting thing that you could ask them about. AEW, despite only having 3,400 fans the last time they went to Boston at the Agnes Arena, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, is going to the TD Garden on June 19th. Their pre-sale is at $2,386 right now. AEW's house show in Calgary, July 15th, the same night as the Great North Wrestling Show in Smith Falls, which will feature Ted Hart. So we could pretty much know that Ted Hart isn't going to be on the AEW Collision in Calgary. It's at 3,034 tickets sold right now. It's noteworthy that SmackDown in Calgary the following month has almost 6,000 tickets sold. AEW, by the way, for their Dynamite in Winnipeg, which I didn't think was a bad show, I watched it, only had about 7,000 tickets sold, even though it was the Jericho's return to Winnipeg. He hadn't been there for many years. It had about 7,000 tickets sold. The August 14th Raw in Winnipeg has over 7,000 tickets sold. So the Raw in Winnipeg is going to outdraw the Dynamite in Winnipeg, despite having hometown boys Kenny Omega, Don Callis, and Chris Jericho on the Winnipeg Dynamite. The SmackDown in Toronto, August 18th, has over 11,000 tickets sold. Now, the AEW Forbidden Door in Toronto at the same arena is long sold out. And by the way, this will be WWE's first time coming to Toronto at the big arena in a long time. They've been going to the minor hockey arena that only holds about 7,000. The big arena in Toronto can actually hold about 18 or 19,000. Which, by the way, I did once have an amateur wrestling match with Sheldon Benjamin at that arena before a Raw taping in 2005. And he did not pin me. I will admit he outpointed me, but he did not pin me. And that started with, and Wavell Star talks about it. He was one of the other guys getting tryout matches on that show. They never gave me a tryout match, but I'll tell you guys a funny story from that, and it involves Johnny Ace. Okay, so everyone was screwing around in the ring before this Raw in Toronto back in 2005, and Shelton was just like mopping the floor with Daivari in amateur wrestling. So I kind of like, you want to amateur wrestle me? For some reason, I decided to like step in because there was a big size difference between Daivari and Shelton. And so we amateur wrestled. And I hadn't amateur wrestled for a long time. And we ended up amateur wrestling for quite a while, like 5 to 10 minutes. And as I said, I don't deny he outpointed me, but he did not mop the floor with me, and he did not pin me. But then Johnny Ace was talking to some girl outside forever, and I was under the impression from Tommy Dreamer, who was in charge of developmental talent at the time, that I was actually going to get looked at this show for like a dark match or something. So I went out to Johnny Ace after this amateur wrestling match and said, "What do I have to do to get looked at?" And then he had me do a match right there with one of their referees, which apparently I didn't sell enough in. And he proceeded to yell at me, to which I just grabbed my stuff and left the arena. I didn't want to stick around. And then the next day, I ended up wrestling The Undertaker before the Montreal SmackDown taping, which was one of my greatest experiences in wrestling. I wrestled The Undertaker for like 20 minutes. And at one point, Ricky Steamboat was refereeing that match. And by the way, there's some great Ricky Steamboat interviews, clips on this channel that I posted this week. And another interesting thing, by the way, after Johnny Ace yelled at me at that Raw, Sarah Stock was also getting a tryout. She ended up becoming a trainer for WWE, and I think she works behind the scenes for AEW now. she told me after that she thinks Johnny Ace was just pissed off that I interrupted his talk with the girl, and that my match with the referee wasn't that bad. He was half my size. So that's why I didn't sell so much. But now I actually know. And here's some advice to wrestlers out there: sell your ass off when you're getting tryouts. But yeah. Let's go back. Sorry to digress about that. Apparently, from the Ring of Honor tapings in AEW that took place this week, Ring of Honor is using a lot of independent wrestlers now. The actual paid for the Dynamite in Detroit was $6,600. For the New Japan Resurgence show in Long Beach, featuring Sasha Banks, it's taking place on the 21st of May. They only have 1,700 tickets sold, so it wasn't a sellout like the last one with Sasha Banks. Could still be, but that's not a great pre-sale. Dark Side of the Ring, which I am featured in the upcoming season, premieres on Vice May 30th with the Chris Candido versus Tammy Sitch episode. And by the way, I just acquired some footage of of an interview with the Sandman, where he says one of the guys that Tammy Sitch had sex with that isn't talked about a lot was Sabu. Who Sabu has 2 matches against the Blood Hunter on the Hannibal TV. By the way, the Blood Hunter returned to the ring last weekend for the Great North Wrestling event in Ottawa that had 463 fans in attendance. And he defeated both James Storm and another wrestler. I think his name was Chris Sullivan or something. I'm sorry, I forget his name. But those all the Great North Wrestling clips from Ottawa are going to be posted on the Hannibal TV by the end of the month. It was a very good return event. Everyone came. There was like 4 or 5 fly-ins. Everyone arrived. The show was well received. The next event is July 15th in Smith Falls, Ontario. And there's some huge news about this. Is going to be a very special show, July 15th, by the way. Not only is there going to be a good amount of fly-ins for this one, some big stars. Ted Hart's already been announced. Blood Hunter's already been announced. Jeremy Prophet's going to be there. Ben Hammond, Greek God popping on, but there's going to be some big names coming to this, and like I can't say it now, but there's some big, huge news about this event that's going to make it really special. Rick Bassman, the former UPW promoter, a good friend of mine, will likely be promoting the Bill Goldberg retirement show this fall in Israel, and Sting is going to be involved in that. Bassman trained the Ultimate Warrior, Sting, John Cena, The Miz, among others. Black Bart, who I've done an interview with, is battling stage 4 cancer right now. He has a GoFundMe going. In MMA news, UFC 288 in Newark, New Jersey was sold out with almost 18,000 fans, over $5 million gate, 250,000 pay-per-view buys. Robbie Lawler, 41, is having his retirement fight against Nico Pierce on July 8th at the UFC 290 show in Las Vegas. Someone says, forget Laurinaitis. Well, apparently he was at an AEW event a few months ago in Arizona, but he had a good run. But apparently he fucked a woman after Vince McMahon fucked her, and there was a quiet settlement that somehow got leaked, and then he was fired from WWE. Someone says, "What up, Dev? What's up? I'm doing great. Better than Billy Graham, who I just mentioned. I mean, he's having a lot of problems staying alive. He's been in the hospital 4 or 5 months now. Is there footage of my match against The Undertaker? No, it was done before the event, where I guess it was common for The Undertaker to work with locals or undercard talent to warm up before events. I don't think he even had a match on that show. I think he just had like some sort of interference. I believe he may have been, forget who he was feuding with at that time. But I was always a massive Undertaker fan. So, and by the way, there's no special reason why I got to wrestle with him other than I was the first guy around the ring that day. And he was in the ring warming up, stretching, and I just happened to be around the ring. He was looking for someone to run drills with. And by the way, he was taking hip tosses and arm drags and headlock takeovers from me. It was pretty cool. Someone said he watched the interview with Brody right before his death. Yes, that was like a news interview that I should do a review of sometime. Any update on the Von Erich Claw movie? I don't know when it's coming out, but I believe production is finished on it. That'll be a movie I'm going to go see for sure. I wonder if it's going to be... supposedly that movie is going to be like set in the 80s and be very 80s-ish, and I'm a huge fan of the 80s. So I'm looking forward to that. I know Lacey Von Erich is involved in that movie because back when I was hanging out with Lacey, the producer of that movie was actually hanging out with us one night at the Statler Hotel in the Penthouse in Dallas. And I remember them talking about it. And I remember thinking that I wasn't thinking much of it. But anyways, I got to take this call. But yeah, that movie's happening, and I think Lacey's involved in it.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this